Hollywood wants to sit at the game table. BBC is going to tell us why here in just a second, but before we jump into that, of course, remind you folks, this video is brought to you by our friends at Hellebarde Games. Hellebarde publishes the modules that they'd like to play, with offerings for OSR, Castles and Crusades, and 5th edition. No matter what rules are in use, old school gaming is at the table. You can grab Hellebarde modules on DriveThruRPG or at the Hellebarde website at hellebardegames.com. And right now, our friends at Hellebarde Games have started a sale to clear out their 5th edition in print stock, offering 50% off of everything they have in print that is targeted at 5e. That's 2 locations and 10 supporting modules, from a swamp filled with lizardmen to a caravan route filled with adventure. Come find what suits your campaign. Use coupon code 5EOOP at checkout to get 50% off. So, it seems that Hollywood is once again, and I say once again because it's a cyclical thing, sitting up and taking notice of Dungeons & Dragons. And this is from the BBC, of course. We'll link to this article in the description below. But this is kind of an interesting insight. And before I jump into the article proper, just a bit of history. Now, those of you who've listened to the live streams where I've played the interview that I did with Gary Gygax all the way back in 2002, he talked about the first attempt to get a Dungeons & Dragons film made and how close it was to coming to fruition. He had Edgar Gross, John Boorman, and of course, Orson Welles on board to make this thing happen. We all know it didn't, and then we got some less than great movies in the interim, and now, of course, there's Honor Among Thieves, but this, once again, has got Hollywood looking our way, so let's have a quick gander at this article from the BBC. Dungeons & Dragons, why Hollywood is keen on a 50-year-old game. Nearly 50 years after the first copies of Dungeons & Dragons were sold, the role-playing game is still played in kitchens, living rooms, and gaming clubs around the world. Its continued popularity is partly responsible for Hollywood's latest blockbuster adaptation. Now, I have not seen the film yet, so I'll let you guys tell me whether or not the movie's any good. An estimated 50 million people have rolled dice and used their imaginations to go on a Dungeons & Dragons or D&D adventure since its inception. In recent years, the game has found new audiences with pop culture references, social media, and the pandemic encouraging people to give it a go. This latest silver screen adaptation of the game, the first one was all the way back in 2000, is another example of the film industry leaning on established intellectual property to encourage people to the cinema. Whether it be Sonic the Hedgehog, Transformers, or Middle-earth, famous characters and settings from other mediums have become a mainstay on the movie release schedule. While I would suggest they've been there from the get-go. I mean, what were some of our first films? You had the Edison Electric 1911 adaptation of Frankenstein, for example. But let's go on. The team behind Honor Among Thieves claim they're not exploiting the game's heritage to cash in on fans. I'm sorry, I couldn't get through that with a straight face. And they want to pay respect to the game's ongoing legacy. I don't believe you. I believe that's what they told the BBC, let's say. Some might be surprised that the game hasn't really changed in nearly 50 years. Oh, you didn't do your homework, BBC. And relies on players' imagination to work, is still relevant in an age of Fortnite and TikTok. However, D&D might be more popular now than it has ever been. Every release of D&D that has come out, the publishers, whether it was TSR or now Wizards of the Coast, has said it's more popular than it has ever been. You'll use your mind to take on roles of a wizard, if you've never sat down for a session, it's basically a game where you role-play a scenario, usually full of unexpected twists and turns, planned and orchestrated by a dungeon master. You'll use your mind to take on roles of that of a wizard, thief, or barbarian in a fantasy setting. Dressing up in character using tabletop models is optional. Rolling lots of dice to figure out what happens in your story is not. Let's see. Talking about YouTube channel Oxventure, subscribed to by thousands. We're subscribed to by thousands here, by the way, BBC. I'm just saying, thousands of people are subscribed to this channel too. As an example of how the game has maintained its relevance in the digital age. Channels like this have become increasingly popular, generating millions of views worldwide. According to Jane Douglas, one of Oxventure's founders, benefits of play for adults is one reason for this success. One of the most important things about tabletop role-playing games is that they're make-believe. Playing pretend for grown-ups is not something you get to do an awful lot as an adult. It is something that you have to leave behind as a kid. With Dungeons & Dragons, I realized I can actually keep doing this. I can play make-believe and tell stories with my friends in an entirely new way. Well, that's nice. The cast work as video game content creators and originally played D&D on YouTube as a one-off until it became obvious that there was a market of people who wanted to see more. And there's Sir Ian Livingstone with his OD&D set, which that is a marvelous photo there. Douglas says, we love to tell stories and we're also nerds. I can say that in a loving way. We love rules, we love video games, and they also owe a great debt to Dungeons & Dragons, which is the foundation for so much of what we play on our consoles. And of course, there's a scene from Honor Amongst Thieves, I guess. Michelle Rodriguez, who plays Holga in the movie, is adamant that this adaptation is not simply trying to cash in on a well-established brand. Michelle, respectfully, that's untrue. It is absolutely trying to cash in on a well-established brand. If it was just trying to be a good fantasy movie, why would they bother marketing it as Dungeons & Dragons? Why would they not simply call it Honor Among Thieves and not tie the D&D name to the title? She told us that the first question she asked when she was approached about the film was, are you going to mess this up? Do you care? Are you just after money? Are you trying to make a genre movie based on 50 years of free advertising? Michelle, again, I don't think you asked that. I don't think you asked that. So my first emotion is fear. Then I read the scripts. It went all the way. The writers are actual fans and they care. As we've established in previous videos, that's not the writer's first concern with this movie. Chris Pine says he got into role-playing by watching his nephew play. The idea that we have to please all the fans is ridiculous and impossible. I think it comes down to the story. If you don't go into a film and feel something, you screwed up whether you paid attention to all the rules or not. Is it a good story? Do you laugh or do you cry? At least Chris is cleaving a little bit more towards honesty. So let's get into more what we here in the old school sphere would like to hear from. Despite the developments and enhancements of gaming technology, Dungeons & Dragons plays largely the same today as it did when it was invented by American Gary Gygax back in 1975. 1973, 74 BBC, but whatever. It came to the UK in the same year after Sir Ian Livingstone and his colleagues Steve Jackson and John Peake played it for the first time. They would end up importing it and founding retail shop Games Workshop. Sir Ian Livingstone, co-founder of Games Workshop and children's author, with an original copy of Dungeons & Dragons from 1975. Sir Ian says, we became immediately obsessed with the game and ordered 6 copies because that's all the money we had in the world. Off the back of that order, Gary Gygax gave us a 3-year exclusive distribution agreement for the whole of Europe. He, like us, was operating out of a flat at the time, so it was kind of us all role-playing as businessmen while also role-playing in the game. Well, Gary had a house, Sir Ian, but other than that, Dungeons & Dragons was a milestone in gaming history. It opened up your imagination like no game had ever done before, and I don't think any game ever will. Despite his instant love of the game back in 1975, Sir Ian says he is still a little surprised that it has gone on to have the lasting impact that it has, laughing. Geeks have become chic. But we all enjoy stories. We all enjoy worlds of wonders. So why can't we as adults enjoy them? If we can enact part of it as if we were actually there, what's not to like? Very wise words from Sir Livingston. And yeah, the BBC, you know, they got a couple of bits and pieces not exactly correct. But yeah, what do you guys think, though, about Hollywood having a keen interest in D&D? Do you think we'll see more of this? Again, I haven't seen the film. I haven't brought you guys a review. I really don't want to give money to a company that so clearly dislikes its fan base as Wizards of the Coast does. I mean, you know, at least Chris Pine's being honest, saying, you know, well, we're just trying to make a fun film and we know we can't please everybody. Whether you like or dislike it, it's honest that they're not even going to attempt it. So let me know down in the comments below what you think about this piece. I'll link to the original article, of course. And if you haven't already, please click the subscribe button. Please click the bell icon for notifications. Give the video a thumbs up if you like it. And we'll be back later tonight. Guess what? We have special guest Matt Finch coming on tonight, and we're going to talk about the Swords and Wizardry Kickstarter, which has just exploded in a very awesome way. So be here for that, and I'll talk to you then. And go pop some popcorn. Peace.